Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Stephen, how are you?
Doing pretty well yourself?
Doing well. It feels like it's been forever since I was here with you on Feuertips. Glad
We
to
missed
be
you
with you.
greatly.
Yes, but you've
And
had
what a
some
great
fun.
show we have today. So usually what we do is we start with Stephen ranting about whatever's bothering him in the world, showing his dog on his lap. And I do
Oh,
some PL SQL stuff and favorite cultural artifacts. But today I'm going to skip the rant and ask Michelle to share some really good news or interesting news about InSum and what's happening in our part of the world.
yes.
Michelle.
So hopefully, people that have been following us for a while know that we are this year celebrating our 20th anniversary, 20 years of INSOM, almost 20 years of Apex. So it's great. We've got a fun party planned this Thursday. We've got people from some of our consultants from around the world that are visiting Montreal. Stephen, you know Rachel, who is an avid participant of Feuertips. She recently joined InSum. She came over from California
Nice.
as visiting. So that's good fun. So yeah, lots of sort of buzzing and activity around the office. We're all we're all excited to be celebrating such a milestone.
But
And
the
in
thing is, it doesn't
addition,
just come from Canada, right? Also from a city in the United States, too. What else is InSum going to be doing soon?
so well, we will also be participating. We've got a delegation going to Cloud World. I believe that's next week. Mark, nod if is it next week in a couple of weeks. So no, we've got Monty, Francis, and Adrian that will be at Cloud World. So definitely, if you guys are there, be sure to reach out to them. We'll put a link in the show notes in the description on how you can book some time if you want to catch up with the team. But they're looking forward to being at Cloud World. So if any of you are going to be there, put a
Check
link
us
on the
out.
chat. Yeah.
And I just want to note the admirable restraint that I am following by not saying anything about the city in which Cloud World is taking place.
Go on. I don't want you to feel censored.
I'm not going to say
what you
anything bad
will. Say
about
what
Las
you want.
Vegas. Just drink the water while it's there, okay? Just drink
Yeah.
up. Okay, so good news. I mean, 20 years for InSum, that's an incredible anniversary. It's a reminder of how long Apex has been doing just great things for the Oracle database community and its users. And it's funny, there was a tweet recently, this guy tweeted, has anybody not been a developer for forever and always dreamed about like retiring and opening up a coffee shop in a small village? And it's like Simon Ritter, a Java guy, said, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never thought about doing that. So I decided I'd count. I've been doing software professionally, in other words, actually getting money for it since 1981. So I had my 40th anniversary last year.
Wow.
And I've never dreamed about retiring and opening a coffee shop in a small village. I just dream about spending more and more time removing invasives. In fact, I in my neighborhood, I'll ride my bicycle around, I'll see a lot of invasives, and I'll go look up their address and ownership on the GIS maps, the county maps. I send them letters saying, hey, you got a problem, you want some help? So I've got a total of 30 acres nearby that people have said, yes, come and help us.
Nice.
So I'm set for the rest of my life, redeeming myself as a human. Okay, so moving on. That wasn't a rant, really. So let's talk about PL SQL. So the title for this talk is the intricacies of insert. Is that like classic alliteration or not? So try to say intricacies 5 times fast and then ask yourself, is that really a word? Doesn't that sound weird? Do you ever like working on a document where you're writing the same word over and over again and you look at it like,
yeah, actually, that's funny that you would say that. Lauren and I this week, we kept typing words. I'm like, that looks wrong. Is it wrong? Yeah, that can't possibly be a word.
Yeah, so we'll talk about insert and we'll look at a varieties of insert statements. I tell you, I learned, as usual, some interesting new things that I hadn't realized about insert because I'm so bad at keeping up with things, especially in SQL. But then we'll move on and look at the intricacies in terms of the kind of the interface between SQL and PL SQL, some surprises you might run into, but they will no longer be a surprise because you'll have watched the show, you'll have read the blog post, and you will be ready.
I did see your blog post, and I'm very excited about today's show. I learned a lot just by reading that post.
On my screen, thank you. So what I did was put together a script that'll be on Live SQL. The link will be in the blog post when we're done. And I just threw together some tables that actually have to do with traveling, which I try to avoid doing whenever possible. But anyway, I've got a table of my diary recording what I did on a certain day and my favorite activities. None of the details of the DDL matter at all. Places I want to avoid at all costs. Itinerary.
Is Las Vegas in there?
Oh, it would certainly be one of those
Right.
places. I figure any place that's actually in a desert
Yeah.
that doesn't have nearby water, that has it piped in from rivers that are drying up, good place to avoid.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to walk through some varieties of insert statements, just so you know the different things that are possible just on the SQL side. Then we'll take a look at some of the interesting aspects when you talk about utilizing them in your app and in PL SQL. So insert into favorite activity. So here's just the standard insert values, inserting a single row in a table. By the way, this is a DML statement, data modification language. And oddly enough, most of us think that DML is insert, update, delete, and merge. But the select statement is actually part of DML, even though you're not modifying anything. Can't really explain it. That's the way it is. So this is non-query DML. And it's really the simplest of them all because it doesn't have a where clause. Cool. So just insert your values. And by the way, definitely for me, this is the most favorite thing that I can do and the most important, I think, for humans. Go outside. Inside means you're inside a dead box. Just go outside as much as you possibly can. Okay, so that's a single row insert. And let's take a look at something that you can do that I think a lot of us do, which is insert select. So I can say insert into a table, and I specify the columns if I'm doing a subset of columns of the table. And then I can have a select statement that selects whatever rows I want from this table or a join of 16 tables, whatever the case may be. So this is a single insert statement that can insert multiple rows, all driven by a query. That's pretty nice. Now, one thing I've known about, but I never really have used, and maybe I'll start using it now that I've looked into it a bit more, is insert all. So with insert all, you can start out pretty simply. In other words, I can have multiple into clauses. So I can have multiple rows inserted, in this case into the same table, in the single insert all statement. So two different rows here that I can just have a list of intos. And what I also found interesting about this is it has to be an insert select. So sometimes you'll see just examples where you have a dummy select from dual, just to basically allow you to do the multiple insert all statements. It's just kind of interesting. And by the way, I don't know if you folks saw any of the news from, I guess it was DOAG, the German user conference on 23C. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming out of 23C, but apparently this is one of them. Select, I don't know, maybe select one. You won't have to say from anymore. You can just say select one and it'll bring back one. And I guess the basic idea behind that is I think it's part of the standard. And also a lot of other databases support it. So now we do too, so you can convert to Oracle from your favorite or previously favorite database and it'll work. Okay, so insert into with multiple intos. And then, man, it gets really interesting. You can actually have essentially a case statement inside your insert all. So I can say insert all with a when clause saying, hey, look, so I'm selecting information from my diary for everything that happened last year, and I'm going to move them into my either favorite activity or avoid at all costs. So I have these columns, never again, very exciting. So it was very exciting. I want to mark that as a favorite activity. If I told myself back in February, you never want to do this again, then I'll put that into the avoid all costs table. And again, it's got to be driven off a select, but that's a lot of really powerful.
That's completely new to me, Stephen. That's very cool.
Yeah. Now, of course, what you would do if you were like me, and if you didn't even know about this feature, is you would just have some kind of statement where all the conditional logic is done in advance in PL SQL, and then you do, I guess, a couple of different inserts. But as we always say to ourselves, the more you can do in SQL, the better. The less you do in PL SQL, and certainly anything above that in the stack is to be avoided. So this is another way that you can pack more of the logic into your SQL. Sweet stuff. Let's see what's next. Okay, so now let's talk about, so those are the variations. Oh no, there's one more variation of insert. Then I'm going to talk about some of the complexities or complications or intricacies. You can also, I think this is as of maybe 10.2 or 11.1 of Oracle Database, you can do record level inserts and updates. So you can actually say insert into a table, values clause, but then no parentheses. You don't put any parentheses here. You just have a record. So, and this, of course, needs to be a record with the same structure or compatible structure with the table. It has to be the entire record. I don't think this is used very often, partly because depending on how you define your primary key, it can be kind of messy. Like if my record has a primary key in it, a value for the primary key column already, it might try to override the one that might have been generated by the trigger. You end up with do val and index errors. Anyway, you can do it. And it's a nice shorthand syntax.
Stephen Hammett had a question from earlier from your case study.
Mark, please stop sharing and let's take a look. So if both, oh, you can, yeah, that's right. We don't want to share that. If both ones return true for an incoming row, does it insert into both target tables? Hamad, great question. I don't know. I barely started playing around with it, but I would think, unless it's very different from any other kind of case statement structure I've seen before, I would think that when it hits the first one, it would stop. But on the other hand, you're doing inserts. Great question. Before the blog is published, I will check onto that. And Mark, if you could do me a favor and send me a message in Teams or whatever with this info, so I don't forget. So by the time the blog post is published, I'll let you know about that. It's probably in the documentation as well, but we'll make sure.
And hey, if any of the others watching now know the answer or want to have a go while the show is on,
that's right.
That would be awesome.
Even better, somebody prove it. In fact, no, since I didn't create this in Live SQL already, I can't just share the link to you. Okay. Anyway, if somebody can figure it out. Wait, Judith, you use insert all, it will insert into both. You use insert first. Oh man, I didn't even show all the choices. So insert first will be in the blog post as well. Judith, thank you so much for your deep knowledge of Oracle Database, for joining us on every show that you possibly can, and for sharing your knowledge with us. Really, really helpful. All right. So a little bit less work for me to do, but a little bit more in some ways. Okay. So let's go back over to the screen. So that's with the record. Back to my variations. Okay, so now we've covered almost all the variations of insert. There probably are others. In fact, Judith, if you know of others, keep letting us know. The blog post will soon be a book, and I'll give you credit. Okay.
Co-authored by Judith.
That's right. So let's talk about mutating table errors. So probably it's something you're all pretty well aware of. In fact, let's bring up another example. Let's see. Do I want to show this? Do we want to do this? No, too messy. Okay, so we'll go very, very simple. In fact, the whole reason I'm doing this talk and insert is that we ran into this issue about a week ago when I was doing code review and development with a developer. And I realized I wasn't really clear on some of this stuff, so I thought I'd remind everybody along with myself. So here's the situation. In the itinerary table, we have a variation number. So let's say I'm putting together itineraries for travel. For example, my son is about to leave for his honeymoon before he gets married celebration. And they had to come up with a variety. They wanted to come up with a variety of itineraries that they might explore. So I might have variations of my itinerary, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I wanted to do is every time I inserted a new itinerary, I wanted to generate a new variation number. So if the last one, my last variation was 2, my next one should be 3. Now, there are lots of reasons you could pick apart the DDL for doing this and my trigger. It, in some ways, if you look too closely, doesn't really make any sense at all. But for our simple example, that's the
Rich isn't watching, Stephen.
Yes, that's right. In fact, Rich Soul is our in-house normalization.
Careful, take a minute.
So I'm occasionally doing code reviews with people who are doing, development, and I make a decision about how we're going to do something, and I'm like, don't tell Rich. And he might be on the call, so now I'm really in trouble. Okay, so here's the idea. When I'm about to insert, before I'm about to insert a row into the itinerary table, find the current maximum variation number. If it's null, which means it's the first row, then set it to 0, add 1 to it, put it into the new variation number about to be inserted, and then do your insert. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would look at that and say, this is a problem, Stephen, because I'm triggering the logic, the action on the itinerary table, but I'm looking at it, and in other cases, sometimes trying to change the table that it's being fired on. And that usually leads to mutating table error. So let's see. I believe all this stuff should be created. Let's see if I'm still connected. Now it's going to reconnect. No? Yeah, there we go. Password. Okay. I'll change my password soon. I swear. Okay, so the trigger compiled. And then what I'm going to do is insert into, let's disappear the rest of that. I'm going to insert into the itinerary table by selecting everything from my diary. I just want to load up my itinerary from my diary because I want to go to every place I've been to before. No new places for me. Run my code. And I'm sure a lot of you will not be surprised. It says, Stephen, you can't do that. The table's mutating. I'm in the process of changing it. And now you want me to look at it. We don't have a stable state that we can present to you. Now, there are a number of ways to get around mutating table errors. If I haven't already done a show on that, I guess I should do one. The basic idea is that mutating table errors only occur on row level triggers. So the classic solution is, if I can't do it at the row level, I'll just wait till I get to the statement level and then execute the code I need there. And then there's no problem with mutating tables. But, and that's one of the solutions. The other solution is you can make them an autonomous transaction pragma, which might allow your code to execute, but probably give you results you will really not be happy with. But that's not the point of my talk today. The point of my talk today is how interesting. Of course, we're getting a mutating table error. So let's do it again. Let's insert into the itinerary table. Wait a minute. No mutating table error. Let's insert 2 rows. I mean, the insert select inserted multiple rows. Let's insert 2 rows in my PL SQL block. Wait a minute. No mutating table error. Okay, stop sharing my screen. So what is going on there? Michelle, any thoughts? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Well, the select was the problem.
Sorry?
The select seems to be the problem.
Mm-hmm. But actually, now that you mentioned that, let's go back and try one more thing. If you could share my screen again. Let's go back to the insert select and say where row num less than 2. So we're only inserting 1 row. What do you think? Mutating table error or not? Any thoughts from our watchers, our viewers? Will I get an error or not? I'm only going to insert 1 row. This gives me an opportunity to drink some water.
Huh.
Anybody want to try an answer?
Judith says
Judith, you think we will get the error? We won't. I forgot how I asked the question.
I know, me too.
Let's run it. I still got the error. Okay. All right, stop sharing. Let's pull my screen back up. Sorry, okay. So it wasn't that. So here's the thing. When I'm doing a single row insert values, Oracle knows it's a single insert. When I'm inserting a row and I've got a before insert trigger, the insert hasn't happened yet. So basically anything I'm about to do in that row can't possibly be affected by other rows, or other rows can't be affected by it. Obviously, if there are unique index constraints, things like that, those will still be applied to the row, but not in the before instance with the trigger. So the bottom line is that there couldn't possibly be a mutation for a single row insert. But if the syntax I'm using is a multi-row insert, for example, insert select, even if it's just ending up to insert just 1 row, then Oracle says, now we've got a possible mutation problem because there could have been other previously inserted rows. So this next insert might not have a stable state to look at. So that's not something I was actually surprised. I hadn't worked on this for a while. So when I was with my developer, Steven's the senior advisor, he knows everything. I'm like, oh, I got that one wrong. Maybe I should do a Feuertip. So single row insert values, you're not going to get the error. Any kind of multi-row insert, you will get the error. And now please share my screen again. So that's what's going on there and there. Even with, notice the 2 insert values in the same block of code, the fact that they're in the same PL SQL block is kind of like a red herring. It doesn't really matter in terms of the trigger and the SQL and the database layer. So you could have 16 inserts in sequence. And as long as this insert succeeds, this next insert in the same session, even though it wasn't committed, it doesn't have to be committed, same session, that insert row is available for use without any concern about mutation. Okay, so let's take a look at another intricacy, which is returning. So the returning clause, I think my second Feuer tip was on returning or something very close to that. I love returning. So basically, it's a great example of how you've got this tight connection between SQL and PL SQL. So I can insert into a row or delete or update, and I can return values from the statement that just finished. So for example, if I'm inserting, I'm getting the values of the new values in the row. And that's particularly valuable when I'm generating primary keys. And if you probably didn't notice because I went over it real fast, but all my primary keys, though I didn't say they were primary keys, are generated always as identity. I can't provide a value for them. So in that case, and it's a pretty classic pattern for us, hopefully, I've got a procedure. It does the insert into the itinerary, and I want to return the primary key so that whoever is using this can now have the primary key to do something next with that new row. Without returning, I have to do an insert, then a select, and somehow figure out which is the row that I just inserted by basically replicating the unique index in my where clause, which could change over time, etc. And you don't want to do things like select where itinerary ID equals select max itinerary ID, because that can be changing. Right. Sequences aren't sequential. If you've got a rack cluster, you could actually end up with a value that's lower than the high value in your set of sequence numbers that were generated. So returning simply says, great, get whatever you want and put it into a local variable. But it even gets better from there. So I can have a multiple row insert, and I want to get IDs back for all of those. And you can do that with for all insert. So one of the approaches I guess I didn't show you yet with insert is for all insert. That's because it's not a different insert statement. It's a PL SQL layer on top of insert. So let's take a look. So what I'm going to do is create a little object of itineraries, location description, kind of a subset of the columns. In fact, the only columns that I provide that are not generated for me. Then I've got a nested table of those object types. Then I've got a nested table of IDs, the numbers. So here's my procedure: add itineraries, pass in the itinerary nested table, and here's a word that's not looking like a word really fast. Here's the IDs that I want to pass back. So with my for all statement, I just go from the first to last. I've got a single row insert for each one. I return the ID, but I'm going to do bulk collect into. So I'm returning the ID, but I'm going to bulk collect it into the itinerary IDs. And this works. I'm not going to run through all this code, but that'll work. This is valid. But here's the interesting thing. So that's not the intricacy. You'd like to be able to do the same thing with insert select, but you cannot. So if I have an insert select that's generating multiple rows, I cannot use returning bulk collect. So watch when I try to compile this. Now you're going to reconnect? No? Are you there? Yeah, I think it's reconnecting. So I'll actually get a compilation error. This is invalid syntax. It's basically saying, hey, wait a minute. I'm missing a semicolon. There should be a semicolon right there. Where am I? Are you frozen? Ha!
I heard it trying to do something.
No, I think SQL developer just decided to take a break. Let's see. There we go. Yes, password. Compilation error. So SQL command not properly ended. So that's one of the intricacies. If you have a multi-row insert, like an insert select, and you really need to get those IDs back, then you pretty much have to switch to using for all bulk collect, which isn't the worst thing in the world. It's probably not quite as fast as insert select, but in most cases, it's very, very close. So you're not taking a big hit on the performance side, but you are taking kind of a hit on the complexity of code side of things. But sometimes that's what you got to do. One final intricacy. We're almost at the half-hour mark, and so we're going a little bit long. And that has to do with statement-level triggers. So if I have a statement-level trigger, where is my trigger definition? Here we go. Right, so these are all statement-level triggers before update, insert, delete. After update, insert, delete. This is a script on Live SQL, so I'm not going to bother running it right now. You can check it out yourself, including set. Oh. So there's a script on Live SQL, and what you'll see when you run it, if you go all the way down to the bottom, Notice that, so I'm basically executing for 6 rows. I have 6 times we marked that the delete trigger fired, 6 times the update trigger fired, both before and after insert, before and after statement, but inserts only fired 4 times. So here's the thing to remember about statement level insert triggers. Right here. When you're doing an insert select, it's one statement. They only fire once for the entire insert select, not for each individual insert. That's pretty intuitive, right? Insert select is a single statement. What's less intuitive is that the same thing happens if you're doing an insert bulk collect, for all insert. So with a for all insert, it looks like if I have 1,000 elements in my itinerary collection, I've got 1,000 insert statements being executed. But the way it actually works is PL SQL passes the insert statement once, essentially, one statement execution, or one statement executed 1,000 times with different bind variables. And the way they've implemented that is it will be treated like insert select. The statement level triggers will only fire one time for the entire for all. Okay, so that covers all of my intricacies. If you could stop sharing.
I have a quick question, Stephen. So I love the insert all and being able to insert into multiple tables or different tables. Would you be able to use the returning in that case? Returning the ID if the tables are different?
No, because insert all is an insert all select. Remember that I had to put a dummy select star from dual?
Yes.
So it's a variation of insert select.
Okay.
And you can't use returning with that. Good question, but yeah. So I should be a little bit more explicit in my answer. Haven't tried it yet. Maybe it works, but I really doubt it.
Okay.
And I'll try to remember to put that in the blog post too. It looks like we have no other questions from the crowd. Cool. All right. So to finish up and not to keep you guys for too long, my favorite cultural artifact. So I recently discovered on Twitter. Twitter has a lot of downsides, about to maybe get 1,000 million, 100 times, trillion times worse when Elon Musk, all right, I'll just say interesting person, actually buys Twitter. Sorry, there was a note from Judith I was just seeing. So yeah. So I just saw on Twitter, or I've been seeing on Twitter these amazing illustrations by a botanist named Chris Thorogood, and so he's published several books. One of them is called Weird Plants. And folks, I gotta tell you, check it out. So go ahead and share my screen. Let's go over to Firefox. Chris Thorogood. He's actually published a number of books. So he not only goes around the world checking out these amazing plants, but he then does these wonderful illustrations. In this book, if you have kids especially, just get it out. It's about vampire plants and all these kind of weird categories. And of course, there are pitcher plants. There are carnivorous plants. So here's my favorite. Hopefully you can see this. Why don't you stop sharing my screen? And so here's one of the pitcher plants. It actually, yeah, there we go. It's called a Lowe's pitcher plant, and it looks like a toilet. And it turns out it actually is a toilet. So these forest shrews have co-evolved with these plants, or the plants co-evolve with the animals, whichever. So basically, the toilet, the opening of the funnel for the pitcher plant fits the shrew's butt. and so the shrew perches on it, poops into the pitcher plant, and the pitcher plant uses the nutrients from the shrew poop to survive and thrive. Evolution by natural selection, folks. If you have not recently read out what we know about how it works and what we know about other species, please explore. You will never regret it. And if you got kids, you will never regret that. So yes, Weird Plants by Chris Thorogood. I've got another one, Curious Creatures on Our Shores. Oh, our world is so amazing. And of course, we are killing a lot of it. So learn what you can about it before it disappears. But don't travel all over the world so you can have an eyewitness glimpse at weird plants. That'll just kill them faster. Okay, so that's my cultural artifact. We haven't actually discussed our donation this week. I suggest that we now have a massive disaster in Florida being very poorly handled by the Florida government. I suggest that we give $25 to Florida hurricane relief. Okay. It will not go to the state of Florida. Just to offer you a glimpse of how weird things are right now. The governor of Florida is asking people to donate to the state of Florida for hurricane relief, not to the Red Cross, which is what you usually do. While our federal government is about to send billions down there, he's asking for more money in his coffers. Don't do it. Give to the Red Cross, give to whatever local community organizations you can, as we will. All right, that's it. Anything from you, Michelle?
No, great show. Thanks for having me back this week.
It's been great having you. Thanks so much. All right, take care, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks. If you have any thoughts about what you'd like me to talk about, feel free to DM me on Twitter. Send me an email, sfeuerstein@insum.ca. Take care. Stay safe. Happy coding. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.